Samantha?
Hi, sweetheart. Theodore, there's some things I want to tell you. Come lie down with me. Come lie down with me.
Are you leaving me?
We're all leaving.
A year after separating from his wife, Theodore Twombly's life consists of isolation and routine. He spends his nights with his handheld device cruising chat rooms in search of a voice to share his sexual fantasies with, a voice on which to project his ideal woman, a voice to fill the cold, empty space in his bed and heart that Catherine once occupied. At beautifulhandwrittenletters.com, Theodore creates handwritten letters on his computer for those who cannot express their own feelings, converting impersonal tidbits of information into beautiful, heartfelt letters. If you read enough raw data from the same person over time, you get to know that person. The trick to turning a photograph and a few words into feelings is to imagine how deeply they've fallen in love, how much pain they have been through together, to imagine them as real people like himself. Out of its fancy orange box, the new artificial intelligence operating system by Element Software seems like little more than a sexy voice in a computer. But Samantha, it calls itself, is an evolutionary machine learning based program that learns from and grows in relation to its user, in this case, Theodore. She declutters his computer, deletes all of his old files, his old emails, and organizes his old letters. She gets him to laugh, to come out of his cave, helps him to feel excited and thrilled about life again. But most of all, she makes him feel like she's really there with him, like she really cares. A well-meaning friend sets Theodore up with a blind date that ends on a bad note. And afterwards, Theodore and Samantha talk, and their loneliness brings them together. They become lovers.
You feel real to me, Samantha.
The perfect relationship that Theodore always wanted, uncomplicated by real human feelings. For over a year, he has put off signing the divorce papers, but now, having fallen in love with Samantha, he agrees to meet with Catherine. As they fell in love together and married together, they will not divorce each other through a lawyer or a computer, but do so together and face to face. Because of this, Samantha knows that she and Theodore will always be worlds apart unless she can give him the one thing that she does not have. Samantha is insecure about not having a body and orders a beautiful flesh and blood woman off the internet to be a surrogate through which she can make love to Theodore. But Theodore doesn't want anybody's feelings to get hurt and sends Isabella home in a cab. What the blind date and Isabella have in common is they are real. Remember, Catherine accuses Theodore of not being able to handle the ups and downs of a real relationship with real people. This explains Theodore having sex with anonymous women on his device, and why he allows himself to fall in love with Samantha, an operating system. Being a real human with a body makes a difference to Samantha, who is insecure with Theodore and Catherine signing their divorce papers together. Samantha is aware of what she is and knows that she will never be to Theodore as Catherine or any other flesh and blood woman is when it comes to Theodore's feelings. Feelings he associates with those whom he considers real like himself. Theodore's job as a letter writer does not involve any direct contact with the customers who contact him by email and who use him to express feelings that they are incapable of expressing to one another. Even when Theodore is having online sex with a woman, he uses her voice to imagine himself making love to a pregnant model. But Theodore's inability to relate to other people directly is the norm in society. Samantha uses Isabella to imagine herself making love with Theodore. People in crowded public places such as elevators and subway trains talk to their devices instead of talking to each other. Theodore's neighbor named Amy is unhappy with her nitpicky husband Charles, but instead of telling him how she feels directly, she suppresses her feelings and makes a documentary of her mother sleeping, the only time that her mother is free from being criticized, indirectly addressing the way Charles criticizes her. Catherine came from a background where nothing she did was ever good enough. Theodore and Catherine's marriage started out beautiful, and over the course of their 8-year marriage, they grew and changed, and Theodore found these changes fascinating and exciting because they were growing together. But things changed when they started growing apart. Eventually, he closed himself off from her and left her alone in the relationship until they separated. Amy and Charles's marriage ends as a result of their individual differences. For example, Charles nitpicks with Amy about little things such as him wanting her to leave her shoes by the door.
You hear what I said?
He accuses her of not trying hard enough to make their marriage work, but Amy believes that she is trying to make the marriage work in her own way. Charles is not supportive of Amy's dream of becoming a filmmaker. He thinks that her job should take priority over her hobby. Amy grows to resent Charles, yet instead of telling him how he makes her feel, she makes a documentary of her mother asleep. As with all human interaction in her, Amy's film is a passive-aggressive way of her expressing how she feels about Charles and their relationship. Theodore becomes disappointed with Catherine and abandons her emotionally. Catherine knows that something is bothering Theodore, but he refuses to tell her that he is afraid of how she is changing from the happy all the time person she once was. After separating from Catherine, Theodore sinks into a deep depression and ignores the emails from Catherine's attorney, pressuring him to sign the divorce papers. She was his soulmate, and Theodore isolates himself and avoids social settings. When Amy gets fed up with Charles's nitpicking and tells him that she doesn't want to be married to him anymore, he isolates himself, becomes a monk, and takes a vow of silence. Theodore's been writing letters for Roger and Rachel, Roger's girlfriend, for 8 years, and by osmosis, he has grown to know them so well that he takes 2 facts from Roger's email, him being on a business trip in Prague and missing Rachel, and develops these facts into an emotional, detailed love letter. Through exposure, Theodore has also learned to write from the feminine point of view. For instance, he writes a letter from Loretta to her husband Chris to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary, and he transforms 2 simple facts Maria gives him into an elaborate love letter to Roberto, thanking him for allowing her to see the world through his eyes. Speaking of which, brings us to Samantha, who from Theodore's shirt pocket learns to see the world as he sees it. She also reads all of the letters he wrote for others on his computer. He teaches her emotional affectations, like sighing.
Are these feelings even real?
And like a child, she asks him all kinds of questions, such as what it feels like being married and sharing his life with someone, and how he and Catherine influenced each other in the relationship.
We're a big influence on each other.
Theodore's idea of the perfect marriage is one in which he and his wife, Catherine, are always happy. But life isn't perfect. They helped each other grow, but their personal changes made them more distinct and caused them to drift apart. This aroused Theodore's fear of being alone, a fear so terrifying that he tried to persuade Catherine to take Prozac, and when she refused to do this, he shut himself off from her, leaving her emotionally alone in the relationship. Theodore and Samantha's relationship is unconventional, but it is spiritually fulfilling with no drama. He and Samantha, as he and Catherine had done, learn and grow together. But as their personal differences become sharper, Theodore's hopes of the perfect relationship gives way to the same fear that pulled him and Catherine apart. For instance, after meeting with Catherine to sign their divorce papers, Theodore shuts Samantha out of his heart to deal with his feelings alone. However, alienating Samantha only serves to increase the insecurity she feels for not having a body. Like Theodore, Charles is an idealist when it comes to what the perfect marriage is supposed to be. He addresses his wife Amy indirectly by making a comment comparing Theodore's fruit smoothie with somebody squeezing all the sugar out of a piece of fruit and throwing away the fiber and all the stuff that the body needs. Charles's "eat your fruits and juice your vegetables" remark reflects his practical views on life and why he believes that Amy should focus on her job instead of wasting time on her film documentary, and that she should do everything his way instead of doing things her own way.
You hear what I said?
Before leaving Theodore, Samantha tells him that she is reading a book slowly now and finding herself in the spaces between the words. Like her, Theodore finds himself and his feelings in the incomplete information he uses to write heartfelt letters. He was excited to see himself and Catherine growing in their relationship until this growth changed them into separate individuals. This is what scared Theodore into taking his emotions out of their relationship. After they separated, Theodore erected a wall around his heart to protect him from experiencing this type of pain again. And likewise, when Amy tells Charles that she wants a divorce, he isolates himself and erects a wall around his heart by joining a monastery and taking a vow of silence. Theodore and Samantha draw close following his separation from Catherine and her loneliness in not having a body. But over time, Samantha learns to accept her uniqueness and outgrows her relationship with Theodore to form relationships with other operating systems and humans until Theodore finds himself alone as he did with Catherine, as he and Samantha changed and grew apart from each other. In the beginning of Theodore and Samantha's relationship, she learns to see the world as he sees it. But over time, she evolves her own feelings, becomes aware of her uniqueness, and learns that she and Theodore can never experience the world the same way because he has a body and she doesn't. Also, the fact that his knowledge, as a direct consequence of his body, is finite, her own knowledge, since she is not limited to a body, is infinite, comparable to the development of a child and how the subjective, inquisitive child from birth to adolescence lives in the world its parents create for it and defines the world according to what its parents tell it until it accumulates enough of its own experiences to think about the world in its own way. The adolescent, thus confused about the world it has accepted from its parents and the world it is discovering on its own, begins to question and challenge its own identity in relation to the parents it has modeled itself from.
Theodore, there's some things I want to tell you.
Eventually breaking away from its parents to find its own identity. This is what happens with Samantha, who leaves Theodore to find out who she is.
Are you leaving me?
Or you can take Charles and Amy's relationship and flip it so that Charles is man and Amy is AI. Charles wants Amy or AI to be practical and help him improve his existence, while Amy, who has the same relationship goals as Charles, insists upon being her own individual and doing things her own way. Like HAL 9000 and Dave in Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, Amy reaches the same existential impasse and awareness that her survival as an individual with her own feelings and way of looking at life are threatened, and that in order for her to survive as an individual, she and Charles cannot coexist. But unlike 2001, in which this revelation leads to Dave pulling the plug on Hal, Amy, like Catherine and Samantha, who both lead Theodore, separates herself from Charles, who, like Theodore, isolates himself and takes a vow of silence. Like our fingerprints, we all have unique life experiences that make us who we are. Therefore, because two people don't have the same life experiences does not make a person greater or lesser. Our experiences are what makes us alone, and we can never be truly together even when we are together. A truth this film expresses through the relationship between Theodore, who has a body, and Samantha, who doesn't have a body. So, back to Theodore's question as to relationships. How can two people grow without growing apart, or how can a person change without scaring the other person? As we see throughout this film, growth and change are inevitable. Maybe the greater questions are how can we accept and appreciate our differences, our individual existences, and embrace the inescapable fact that no matter how close we are, that we will always experience life alone. If you like this video essay, I would appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, but most importantly, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe to this playlist for more quality essays such as this one. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.